So there's complexity. It's we always say conversations are messy. Well, this one is very messy. And it's messy because all of that clouding over, that holy shit mode, that little voice, the opinions, every single aspect of the conversations that we typically talk about, assertions, assessments, generalizations, they all come into play. They stick out. If you're looking at it like you're watching a movie, you could point them out when they're happening. They're so loud.
And maybe what they're not saying.
That
And more than just about productivity, like, I like being at home now. I don't have to drive. I can, there's some people have found working from home to be very, very good for them. And so others say, yeah, it works for me, and it gets less stress, I don't have to go into the workplace. So there's a lot of conversations that aren't even about work. It's about how it affects me, and what I like and what I want. So I know today we had talked about maybe doing two pieces. One, which is the kind of the setting the context of the workplace, of this next coming into the fall. Maybe some people are already here around hybrid models, the workplace. What's it going to look like in this next kind of time of being with and living with we call it post-pandemic, but it's still here, right? So what's that look like? What, workplaces shut down, they had remote workers, it was pretty quick and fast. So we talked about what are those, I called it critical, and I think you said crucial, Mark. What are those crucial conversations that people are going to need to have? And in particularly with their peers or as managers, what's your role? Like, what's coming up? What are some things that we need? What's that look like for you, the manager, for you, the employee? And how's that unfolding? And some things to think about if it's it's happening, or you're in the process of it, or you're hearing it's going to be happening soon.
it's happening. There was a pushback from the union on the weekend about going back to work for 2 days a week. Real pushback. It's fresh. You got to find it.
Who's pushing back, Mark?
The
The who?
the unions.
The unions are pushing back, saying what? We shouldn't go back 2 days?
Yes. The employees are not ready, no matter what somebody thinks.
So in some organizations, they have a union or a formal structure that speaks for them.
Yeah.
And there's some that don't have a formal structure, that they have to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
Is it, so what's your take, Mark? Because you're kind of in the, I would say, the heat of this. For Ian and I aren't in a workplace.
I'm not in the thick of this at all.
And anecdotally, and based on my conversations, because I'm also a union steward, there's two camps. I'm not going to put percentages on them, but I'm going to say the camp of the people who are not ready to go back to work is much more of a higher percentage than the ones that are willing to go back. And the ones that are willing to go back are evoking a need for that human contact, the need for that in-person relationships, and that's what's wanting to bring them back. The issue with that is if you bring the people who are not ready to go back, the quality of that human contact is probably going to be precarious, because these people over here are not coming back wanting to chat. One person told me today, I came back and I stayed in the 5th floor of the building because there's less people. I did not go to the 6th floor because I didn't want to see anybody. Well, that doesn't satisfy either this one or this one. So there's that dynamic that's going on. So the whole change management portion of bringing people back to work has either been there or not there. And where it's been there, it's been progressive, it's been communicated, it's been collaborative. And when it's not there, it's a disaster. So that whole those elements of why we want to go back or not going to go back, that discussion, that conversation, that crucial conversation is it either happened or it didn't happen. And if the crucial conversation did not happen, then it's a precarious situation. That makes sense. It does.
And what kind of, that's interesting to ask about if you were looking at reintegration, people coming with back to work in the workplace. What has been the conversations? What has happened? Like, so how are people talking about this is going to happen? Because in some organizations where there's, it's not a negotiable, you're coming back. What do you think is important for us to think about as we start to look at that happening?
I think what's important is that, like, at the risk of repeating myself, that conversation occur. But if you look at that typical crucial conversation, it has three elements basically. It has opinions, it has strong emotions, and it has high stakes. And it starts with those opinions because, and notice I didn't say facts. In most cases, we're talking about opinions. And it starts with the very premise of going back. Because some people are saying people want to go back, and other people are saying people don't want to go back. Those are clearly opinions. They're assessments. They're not assertions in any way, shape, or form. And unless you were to do a comprehensive survey that was not biased or rigged in a way to get the answers you're looking for, then you don't have the data that you need to make that an assertion. So it's an opinion. Then there's a strong emotions, which are usually attached as a derivative of the opinions, because those emotions of fear for one camp of going back to work, not just fear of being sick or not being safe, fear of the unknown. The emotions of the other camp, if you want to just limit it to two, is the ones who say, well, I'm deprived because I don't get that human element, or I'm in an unfavorable situation because I can't work from home because I have, maybe some people can work with two kids, playing around, but I can't. So it's affecting my quality of work and it's having negative impact on me. So that stirs up those emotions. And last but not least, in that crucial conversation triangle, if you want to use that, is the high stakes. Because typically people are committed, I see it, whether it's a private sector or public sector, to their work and the quality of their work and doing a good job and serving the people they serve, because we all have in some way, shape, or form a client. And we want to make sure that we're serving those people that we do our work for, that the result is there. And those high stakes come up in the conversation. If we don't go back to work, then that's going to happen. If we do go back to work and our productivity diminishes, this is going to happen. Anecdotally, a person told me this morning, right now I can push out 10 files per day. In the office, the most I've ever done was 6. So that person says, I'm going back down to 6. And that's, they threw their arms up in the air and says, 6 it will be. So that's where the high stakes come in. So there's complexity. It's we always say conversations are messy. Well, this one is very messy. And it's messy because all of that clouding over, that holy shit mode, that little voice, the opinions, every single aspect of the conversations that we typically talk about, assertions, assessments, generalizations, they all come into play. They stick out. If you're looking at it like you're watching a movie, you could point them out when they're happening. They're so loud.
And maybe what they're not saying
That
in more than just about productivity, like, I like being at home now. I don't have to drive. I can, there's some people have found working from home to be very, very good for them. And so others say, yeah, it works for me and it gets less stress, I don't have to go into the workplace. So there's a lot of conversations that aren't even about work. It's about how it affects me and what I like and what I want. I'm curious though, how does this mesh through with what does the system want? What does the organization want? In my time when I worked in federal government, and when I've worked with other organizations, the owner of the company or the key stakeholders, they literally have the decision making. They're saying this is going to happen. If there's non-negotiables is what I call them. When I was sitting around a management team table and decisions were made, even if I had my resistance and I put my opinions out and maybe even gave some grounded evidence around that decision not being approved, if my management team and we had a great conversation, at the end of the day, the decision was we were going to move forward. Now I have to shift my position and get behind the organization or the bigger team's decision making. So I have to start to align myself to that because I've done my part. I've been, as they say, consensus building doesn't mean I get my way. It means there's been a good conversation, everything's been put on the table. But at the end of the day, this is what the system wants, and this is where we're heading. So how does one start to prepare themselves? Like, what's the system saying?
I think for the most part, so far, the systems, because none of them are in sync in government, have been all over the map. So that inconsistency. So let's say one department says we're going back 1 day a week. Some of the employees are not saying, well, I can work for this other department because they're not going back right away. And so that inconsistency is not helping the discussion. I don't think there's been an overall indication on clarity. Again, one of the points of better conversations is that clarity. In a lot of the cases where it has been, the hammers come down and they've said, you're going back. Okay, might not have been what they wanted, like you said, but at least they knew what they were dealing with. So they could now have the conversation because now they're forced into conversation. Not the ideal situation, mind you, but at least they're having the conversation. This is what it's going to look like. So those fear, doubts, and worry can now be addressed through that conversation. When there's no clarity and it's on again, off again, 1 day here, 2 days here, maybe pushback, discussions, no change management, no conversations, then it festers. Then everybody starts to dig their heels in and say, well, they better not force me back in, or they better bring me back in soon. They better stop preventing me from going in and all these rules. And so both sides are digging in. And the more we prolong the absence of that conversation, the more it festers. Now, that conversation needs some structure to it, some rigor to it, that we all know what that looks like. And without that rigor, we could be going in like, have you seen the newborn giraffe? Pretty clumsy. I would not want us to go in those conversations like a newborn giraffe.
Yeah, I think I brought this up when we were having a sidebar conversation about many years ago when we moved from training plans to learning plans and integrated them into the performance evaluation process, that were good. There was a great structure in place. And I just want to build on what you said, Mark. Then Ian, I'd love you to add in a structure in place. So we were really good at building the framework, and here's what it looks like. It's how do we get people that need to have these conversations ready? because the frame is great. It gives you clarity, it gives you a sense, but the conversation is going to be messy because you described everything, that people are at very different places on what they want, what they're worried about, and the uncertainty and all the stuff that you talked about. And some of them can't wait to get there, hurry up, let's go. So having those conversations. So I remember Treasurer Burr coming to us saying, you know, I know you've got the coaching practices for managers. We need something to go alongside our great framework that's we're hearing is really well done. How do we get managers ready for that shift? Well, what's the conversation? How do they go into those conversations that we know are going to be, you know, not, you know, because there's human beings, everybody's different. So I see it almost twofold, Mark. Like there's always the structure stuff that needs to happen, but then how do we prepare people for the messiness that you described at that conversation? I'm curious what you're thinking, Ian, as you're listening here.
Well, what's coming to mind is sometimes we need to kind of lay a little bit of groundwork within ourselves before we have the conversations. And something that we've done in the past is give people, prior to coaching conversations, a getting ready template. So in a sense, you're already starting to unearth what's important to me. Why do I want this? What is my desired result? So you're kind of priming the pump before you show up. Because as we know in our conversations that we have, if we use relationships, possibility, and action, there's often some undiscovered importance that's sitting unearthed in that conversation for relationship. So if you can give them a framework with some specific questions where they can start to mull over what's going on inside of them, they're going to come to the table with more at their disposal, and even be maybe a little further down the line than they would have if they showed up cold to the conversation. So what would it be like to give people a getting ready for the conversation template prior to coming into that conversation?
So you touched on it on our journey towards action, which is what this is. When we move through relationship, it is what's important to me. Or as change management practitioners would say, what's in it for me, which is the second step of change management. The first one is communication from the top as to why and why now. So that awareness. And the second step is desire. What's in it for me? So that translates into that uncovering, like Ian said, on getting ready, on being clear. And to your other point, Karen, which is so important, as to what's not being said, because there are things that are not being said, which are really cannot be undervalued, underestimated as important potential barriers to this conversation. Even in the management, because there are some levels of management who feel threatened by the working from home situation because they feel that their value is now in question because they're not doing the same job. They're not doing it the same way. And the fear of that they're maybe not vocalizing of the perception, well, maybe they don't need as many managers now because you could effectively supervise way more people on telework than you can in person. So all of these, and oh, by the way, we're living in an organization because we've made that realization that we don't need as many managers. So it's a legitimate fear now. It's been backed up. So there's nothing more real than legitimizing a fear. But it's all of this. If we look at the ones who are moving on that journey successfully, they are having those conversations. They're having them in a structured way. They are doing what you're saying, Ian. They are saying, what are my fears? What are my worries? And they're complex because we're not that simple. We're complex. But what do we typically do when we're faced with crucial conversations? not everybody, but one of the behaviors we have is to avoid it. And that's kind of what's happening in some areas right now. We're avoiding it, we're pushing it back. So avoiding it is pretty well documented as it's either first, second, or third place. I don't have the study in front of me, but I saw it 2 weeks ago. First, second, or third place is avoiding it. I think it's second. The first behavior is hammer down, avoid, not, which is also another form of avoiding it, which is saying, here's how it's going to go down.
You know, and I think there's a bunch of stuff going on inside me right now, Mark. And the fear of, if we try to go back, we'll never get to try to be at home again. It's going to just suck us. Then we know the purpose of the culture is to sustain itself. So the fear is this just going to be, we're all going to be back in the workplace full time. Like, it's just going to suck us back into that, where I would prefer to, like, so just that first step of even 1 or 2 days a week. I mean, just, well, that just is the start. So if I say yes to that, and I really don't want to be back full time, wouldn't mind the hybrid model, but if I say yes to that, so this is the hamster wheel story. And like you just said about the managers, now we're hearing that we don't need it, which I find very interesting, that you don't need as many managers. I think that role is very important when we're working from home. Building shared accountability. If you're going to work from home, now we really do need to make sure that your productivity is there. That, we need to make sure this is a sustainable model. So it's so many more conversations. I did 1 day a week with Veterans Affairs with the case managers to do their write-ups at home. I was the very first manager that ever did that, because they said, when I'm at work, I get interrupted, and they had a lot of stuff when they interviewed a veteran to put into the system. And they would do 4 or 5 clients a day. And then they'd come back in, and it was taking them forever to do it. They said, can we work at home 1 day a week? And I said, yes, you can. Here's the conditions. You have to make sure that there's a case manager enough case managers on site. So if clients need case management, when they walk in, so you can't all have Fridays off to do the write-ups, not off. You can't all work from home. You sort out the schedule. I don't want any additional work on the managers. Number 1. Number 2, you write down what clients you're working on. You come in the next day and you basically have them completed. We will do them. And then if you don't, I don't care if you do it at midnight. It doesn't matter when you input them, but they must be done by the next morning. And I said, the only person that's going to take that away is who? And they went, I don't know. You. These are the 2 conditions. I get it, why you have to have that. It makes sense. But if you start to not follow and meet your productivity and your commitment, well, then I won't be able to let you continue to do that. If you start to now, I come into the workplace and there's no case managers, or there's only 1 when we said there'd be 3, then I'm going to have to do it. So you have to manage this as a team. And they did. I never had an issue whatsoever. So I think like, I worked virtually, you work virtually, Mark. Like, that accountability for me as an employee, to make sure I was accountable to my manager, but we set up, so there's another crucial conversation. How do you set up the virtual relationship that is equitably accountable? Here's how we're doing it. How do we make sure that those that do decide to come back into the workplace, say it is not just a one-way street, that they feel that there's the same expectations, whether you're face-to-face in the office or you're working from your desk at home. So important. So the structure and the accountability agreements that need to be created now are really important, which is why I continue to be able to do virtual work, because I made sure my manager had everything. And still to this day, I document everything I do and I send it in so they know where my time went. And I feel builds mutual trust and respect. So I don't know, I never did that when I was physically in the workplace. Isn't that interesting? So maybe there's things missing. So this is another practice we have. What's missing? The 3 levels: commitment, which we know is not all there. We're not on the same page on What is our commitment to allowing this to continue or have hybrids or whatever? What's our competency level? Like, what skill building do we need to be really good in this new way of looking, or this transition to wherever it takes us, if it's slightly different than everyone comes to the office? And then the last one is structure, like what organizational structures, what tools need to be put in place. Like, so it's very interesting as I look at that. I love that practice in the coaching practices for managers, looking at it from three lenses: commitment, competence, and structure, because we are seeing something perhaps that could be more permanent. We'd like to have that flexibility. I think most employees appreciate and found that very helpful for their well-being, for their productivity, for work-life balance, for just a bunch of things for themselves. So I think there's some crucial conversations that need to unfold to get curious about that, because maybe it is quality of myself that I put on that piece of paper.
If I had to start that crucial conversation, I would say, let's commit to uncovering that startling discovery, that thing that we don't know right now about each other, about the situation. Let's authentically try to get to that startling discovery. And I use that term, I could easily say what's important for both of us, but I use it more generally. That startling discovery, which can only come out through that authentic exchange. I would also say, let's not limit. There's this concept called the fool's choice. It's either we do this or we do that. That's the way I see it. There's no other way. That's called the fool's choice. So either we go to work at the office or we work at home. That's the fool's choice. It has the premise that there's no other option, which is not the fact, but we go to the fool's choice. It's a real thing. It's called the fool's choice. And being not committed to just the two options that are going to come up can help provide that innovation, which we find in our exploring possibilities, which is not being committed just to those two. But we hear that a lot. The importance of that dialogue, which is, dialogue is by definition free flowing. It's not just one way. So being committed to that is really important. But I would say even more so in support of that is, and I'm going to use this term, filling the pool of shared meaning, because we have more in common than we think. And if we can get through that dialogue and actually start sharing, I think through that, what's important to us, I think we can find some common, and I call it the pool of shared meanings, where we can say, well, we're all committed to client service. We're all committed to being engaged in our workplace. We're all committed to health and safety. We're all committed. So if those can be inventoried in the dialogue and agreed upon, we can build on those. And then the rest seem to be the little pieces that need to be negotiated. But we all sometimes tend to start with the more contentious issues in our conversations. So if we can start with the shared meanings, I think that would go a long way in making that leeway. But I would say also a commitment to that listening part as a last piece in this speech, but probably front and center in the whole conversation, the dialogue, to listen, and not just listen so that I can prepare my response, my reaction to what the other person's saying, but really listen, which we all know is a crucial element of that conversation.
What's coming to mind as I'm listening to the two of you is trying to figure out what are the essential skills that are required in this new time period, because we all kind of grew up in a certain format culture of what a manager was and what kind of skills we needed, and we have blown completely through that into this new unprecedented place where we went from that to the complete antithesis of that, and now how do we get to some place in the middle that we can all kind of play and work with together? And I don't know if anybody knows what those are yet. And I think you need to have those open conversations to start to build that trust enough so that you can create some sort of new innovative version of what the new workplace, the hybrid workplace, is going to be.
Well, you just laid two down there. You laid down quite clearly adaptability and trust. So those are two very important ones. You kind of answered them. If you go back and listen, you had those two in there, and they're really critical front and center.
What struck me is I 100% agree with you, Ian. I think the manager has a big responsibility, because if he has or she has, 12 employees, Mark is saying there's camps and maybe in between. So there's a diversity of where people are comfortable, uncomfortable thoughts, what they're resisting. So what came up for me you talked about listening, Mark, is really listening where the resistance is in them and where it's coming in me. As I actually had number one on my page, listening. I think if we could have conversations where the goal, the objective of getting together was to really deeply listen to each other without any action, any possibilities, like just free flow. You use the word dialogue. I love that, just to be able to say what needs to be said. If you had, and Ian was part of this, where you have maybe 2 or 3 questions and you keep answering them. Like you answer them, but you answer them again. Because you cycle deeper when you just start to relax and trust each other and see what emerges. This takes huge trust to say, we have the solutions. We know the right way. It's slowing that conversation down with any commitment to doing anything about it. That's just huge. And to allow a pause and reflection. So this, just to create a template, and going back to I think you talked about a getting ready template, Ian. A getting ready template for people just to listen for right now to everything that's coming up in these times and what's emerging for people, and you can start to see patterns then. So I've done this with organizations where I bring people together in 4 pods, and I have 3 or 4 questions, and it is really amazing. I'm going to say that word. They're so smart. They have the answers. They have different views. But when you create that container where we're just going to listen and gather what the story is, nothing's going to be captured. Nothing's going to be written down. You said this. We just want to hear the narrative right now. Instead of, it's really, really amazing if we just allow and can have that space of trust where people can share as much as they're capable of, but to let that happen. So that really struck me about what you were saying, what both of you were saying, is that's missing. We're nervous, anxious. There's a push to get to action and change. Slowing that down and creating that space without anybody having to do anything with what emerges is really important.
I think there's something else also that comes with that. When you're able to, and I'm going to use the term that we use with regard to feedback model, when you're able to empty your cup, you're then able to hear other things. So once you've gotten the noise out of your head, got it out, now I'm more open to hearing a few other things come that maybe I wasn't quite ready for or wouldn't allow in until I had my say, until I got my cup empty enough. So I think having a format like that would support people in being able to be more open because they've been heard. They had their say. They got it out. They got the fear of what they're afraid of losing, or what they're afraid of giving up, or whatever the case may be. It's out there. Oh, and I'm not alone. Other people have similar ones. Okay, good. Oh, I hadn't thought of that one. And now some new ideas or some new approaches or some new possibilities might have space to land and germinate into something else that they wouldn't have had the space to do previously.
Your vote it's amazing sitting here listening to you, because you both just described in your way the relationship step of our model of relationship leads to possibilities and action. Because Karen, you talked about, slowing down and listening and having that conversation, and Ian, you brought up the other elements in that relationship. And Ian, you kind of described, how do we make this a safe space, which is allowing people to say what they need to say. So you both described a relationship, but what you described is entering into that relationship phase without rushing into the next one, is what you described. Let's sit here for a while. Let's explore this. Let's listen to each other. Let's see what's important for us. Let's hear what's important for us. And let's feel what this is bringing up. So really living that experience of relationship, but not rushing it. So to answer your earlier question, Karen, or Ian, Ian asked the question. I'll add a third one. You said trust, adaptability, and slowing down is probably something that's a paradigm shift, because we're not used to slowing down. But if there's it's ever been a time where we need to slow down to speed up, it's now, where we slow down and have that conversation at the pace that it deserves, to respect those three elements of, okay, let's look at those opinions. Let's explore those opinions. Let's explore the emotions that go along with it. Let's explore what's at stake in that relationship realm before we even start to talk about possibilities. So let's slow down. Let's not rush to possibilities. We'll get there. The objective is not to get there. The objective is to get to the right ones, not just any one.
And I think it might be for the first time, I feel that, I think I said this before, we're not alone. We're all in this, many of us are feeling the same, in the same situation, in this pandemic world. And there could be multiple ways to do things. And I don't think we've ever, in my time, had to think about being that nimble. You said adaptable. I'm using the word nimble. Like, it is an opportunity for us, given the world these days, we have to be so adaptable. If we're not, as a human entity, we're going to be extinct. So this is a really good muscle. I think you said skills. So I'm just pulling in on this one, Ian. That muscle of adaptability, of seeing an organization flourish and function, and teams, and having that kind of multitude of maybe few different ways to do that, is new. We were raised in command and control, and that's what's happening. Command and control is very much still in our primal DNA of military, regime, hierarchical. So it's very deep in us. I'm willing to admit that, even as a mom, so I get it. I get that. So this is really good muscle building. And so what we're going to be talking about is a tool or a practice in another video. We're going to separate this one, which we're seeing as we think really a cool tool to start to bring into your organizations, which is peer-to-peer coaching. So that you can do this in a way with your peers that's very safe, has a structure around it, has someone that holds that space as the facilitator, so you can start to suss this all out for yourself. But you're also getting a chance to support other people. You're getting a chance to do some skill building in a learning environment, but you bring real issues to the table, which I think these conversations, getting ready for these, so this might be the getting ready template, is to have peer coaching circles so that you can bring something in, you can uncover and unsuss your situation, put it back together, and walk away with your own plan for yourself. You'll get some time to reflect, and you'll be coached by different people, but you're also hearing other topics. So even when you're not being coached and you're the person practicing these skill building and coaching that person, you're just learning, 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 learning. So I do think we need to up our learning game. I know I'm still needing to up my learning game in these really different times. So I think peer to peer, we need each other. We need each other more than we've ever needed each other in the peer to peer world, I believe, these days. I think remotely, we've missed that. We've missed, Mark, those touch points in office, informal chats. Can I pick your brain? Oh, I need to get ready for this. We have, even though there could be great virtual work going on, the impromptu stuff is not there. And so, yeah, I think there's some value here to starting at least in a safe space of some peer-to-peer conversations, which is small group, where you get to uncover some of these thoughts and you said opinions and emotions and the stakes. I think the high stakes need to be, we need to know what they are for ourselves, for our team, for our organization. I think it'd be very helpful.
And if you're given that space to be able to explore that for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever the case may be, you're getting that opportunity where you wouldn't normally have it. You're not getting that outside perspective. You're not getting the outside question. You just have your own questions that have been spinning around over and over again, and you're not getting anywhere with your situation. The other thing I love about this particular model is having, no matter where you're sitting in that room, you are learning. And you can set your own learning objective. Okay, this is the area where I really struggle. It's having complex conversations with people or whatever the case may be. And that's your point of focus. That's where you want to up your game for the next few months, whatever the case may be. So you set the stage for yourself. It's not forced upon you by management saying you need to get whatever, you need to go and improve your health and safety or whatever is on the forced learning plan, right? This is your learning plan for you.
As a manager, I don't know what I don't know. And I need to make information on what I can gather. I need to make decisions on what I can gather information on. So that's as a manager or as an organization. And if that information is not there, then there's a risk that the decisions could be the wrong ones or no decisions. As an individual, when we show up in our conversations, the same thing. And when we show up in these peer coaching groups, it's the same thing. I don't know what I don't know. And that process that we go through helps uncover what I don't know about myself, what I don't know about my situation. What I'm uncovering then brings those next elements of innovation and possibilities and then to action. But that first step is crucial, and this allows us to flush it out and get that clarity that we need. So whether it's in the personal level or in the organization level, that clarity, that exploration is so critical, which only comes through conversations.
Our thoughts are like a bad neighborhood. Don't go there alone.
Don't go there alone.
Saying it out loud, having that safe space, getting ready, being prepared, bringing your best self to that really important conversation you want to have. Yeah, we all want that. There's not one person I haven't met that doesn't want that to happen for themselves. And so this is a practice area to get ready and build some skills and get your confidence ready for that really, really important one that you need to have with people that matter.
And there's an accountability aspect to knowing I'm up next. I have to have my topic ready.
Yeah.
You can't, as Mark said, you can't avoid it forever. You're going to have to tackle it sooner or later. So this week it's me, next week it's someone else, but I'm still going to learn regardless of where I'm sitting in that room. But yeah, I got to get ready for that one this week.
Feeding on that, it's amazing how when you're in that room, there might be that nervousness of oh, I need to attack it at some point, but then you witness the other people going through it and getting that clarity, and the more that happens, the more you want to attack it, the more you want to bring it out and say, okay, I'm willing to play now. Give me the pail and the shovel. I'm jumping in the sandbox.
So I think the idea is here that we're going to link you to a new video where we're going to run you through it, or how's that exactly going to work?
I think what we agreed to do, that we would just, so it's a bit clearer what it looks like. So it will be kind of what is it, how does it work, the structure around it, so that you have a sense of this tool and how it works. And we have some stuff that we've used and shared, and so that you can do this on your own. You don't, so it's a sustainability model, that bringing peer-to-peer together, talking about what the skill building looks like, how it works, to have a bit of a better sense of this tool that we've offered and trained a lot of people to be able to mobilize this, one just recently across the country, and some in their own organizations, wherever they want to start to have these kinds of conversations peer to peer.
So in essence,
practical,
so in essence,
replicable and
Yeah.
implementable.
yeah,
And what was the last one? We kind of came up with it recently. Affordable,
accessible,
accessible. Yeah.
So in essence, this was what we need to do and why we need to do it. And the next one is how. Cool. I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Me too.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
It was great. Thank you. Bye.